Everyone. Welcome to week 3 of TCH 430. I hope you're all staying warm in this frigid cold winter that we're having so far. I know that myself, I have not wanted to get out of my warm, comfy clothes all day. I can think of much better things to do inside versus going outside into the cold wind. And one of those things is to look through some of the conversations that you've been having in your discussions and to look ahead and to think about some of the things that I wanted you to keep in mind as we continue to work through this idea of learning design and instructional technology. So, first of all, I wanted to take a few moments to thank all of you for your efforts in the conversation circles, finding some really interesting ideas popping up. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that all of you are approaching these conversations with. And once again, this week I have gone through and pulled out some quotes that stood out to me as I was reading through the different conversations, and some ideas that made me stop and think and reflect upon my own teaching, as well as the teaching that I do with other teachers. So yeah, I know that many of you are still in the process of adding to that conversation, and I encourage you to keep doing so. That helps me think about the need to remind you that whatever you put into those conversations is what you're going to get out of them. So I'm seeing some conversations are very deep and rich and lengthy, and I know those people are getting a lot out of what they're talking about. Other conversations, although obviously insightful and thoughtful, maybe aren't taking the time to go as deep as they could. And I understand that conversations ebb and flow as we are interested or not in the topics at hand, or as we have time or don't have time to really dive into the topics. But just wanted to take a moment to just encourage you all, whenever possible, to dig deeply into those conversations, because the learning is going to occur in those lived experiences that you all have that you can share with each other versus some of the things that I can present to you that are more abstract. But in the meantime, you all are doing a really nice job getting started as we really begin to dive into the content of our course. The other thing I've been appreciating watching come through were some of the metaphors of learning. I know some of you are still working on those. Some of you have posted those earlier in the week. Some of you are still thinking through. I enjoyed in some of the conversations hearing about the thought processes that went into your selections of your visuals. And I really appreciated the depth of thinking that went into composing these visuals. You didn't slap something together and post it on your page, but you really started to think about how can you represent how you see teaching in a visual way. I did this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think that it's always important we can reflect differently and more deeply if we are asked to reflect in different ways. So often we're asked to reflect with words, and because we're asked to reflect with words, that's pretty natural and sometimes is easy, and sometimes easy doesn't lend itself to as much depth as we could possibly have with those reflections. So asking you to think about it in a visual way helps you think about it in a different way, and hopefully maybe something occurs to you that you wouldn't have occurred to you otherwise. The other reason we were doing the visual metaphors is that you will all be asked to create multimodal presentations for the class as we work through the different theories of learning. And so I wanted to give you some practice in a technology course, creating something in a visual way to help tap into your multimodal skills. So I guess one of the things I want you to keep thinking about is, as you are representing ideas in your presentations, how can you appeal to not only the auditory and the textual elements, but also the visual elements to help the rest of the class make meaning. So a few things that I wanted to think about is last week and actually the week before, we've really been focusing on you as a teacher, and how you think about teaching and your paradigms and your learning theories. And before I go and look ahead as to what we're going to be doing this week, I do want us to take a moment to think about how much I appreciate the fact that many of you talked about it was very difficult to pick just one. Theory is messy, practice is messy, and as we know, sometimes even though we may be constructivists at heart, we're faced with a group of students who need more scaffolding, and maybe need to maybe you need to take a more humanistic approach where you really need to get in touch with them and their experiences in life, and think about some of the outside factors that influence their performance. Or maybe you have to look at it from a more behaviorist point of view because you have a group of students who really need to learn extrinsic rewards before they learn to think about it intrinsically. So I do appreciate the fact that many of you pointed out that it's messy, and it is. But I do think that most of us come at learning from a specific paradigm that is our foundation, that we approach how we think about learning. And how what we do in the classroom does tend to be designed around that learning theory. So again, for example, if you're a constructivist and your school is really embracing problem-based learning, for example, the way you might roll that out in your classroom is going to likely look very differently than someone who ascribes to a humanistic or a behaviorist type of paradigm. But again, that said, that doesn't mean that there are elements of all of that in all of our instructions. So I again appreciate that you were all thinking about how complex this idea is. And as you're thinking about how complex this idea is, I want you to start now to layer on this idea of technology and technology's role in all of these different challenges we face as we think about our theories of learning and teaching. And so this week, instead of it being more about us, although we still enter the equation, it's more about technology. And what is technology is one of the things that we're thinking about. And so I am going to be asking you to do another activity this week that helps you explore this question of what is technology. And I'm going to ask you to do that by mapping your use of technology either through time or space. And what I mean by that is you could think about your evolution as a teacher, for example. So how did you use technology when you began your practice, and what does it look like now? And what were the things in between that helped you evolve your use of technology? Did you start by substituting and then eventually move more towards transformation? Are you still in a substitution phase? Or it could even be time in terms of your time in a specific district. For example, maybe you moved to a district where technology was much more utilized and encouraged, and you could trace your evolution as a teacher with technology in that time space. But you can also map how it looks in specific spaces for you as a teacher. So how does it look like in your classroom versus out of the classroom? How does it look like in your maybe you teach multiple grade levels, for example. So maybe how does it look like in your 7th grade classroom versus your 8th grade classroom? So there are a lot of different ways for you to think about mapping what technology looks like in your life, either through time or space. But I think the big questions to think about are who's using your technology, because you're going to be asked not only to map it, to annotate it as well. And what I mean by annotate it is as provide some explanation as to those points on the map, and give us a little bit more context about your ideas. And so again, think about who's using the technology. When and how often are they using the technology? How are they using the technology? Do your learning paradigms relate to the way you're having students use technology? So for example, I know several years ago, I've always described myself as a constructivist, and I realized that some of the things I was asking students to do with technology wasn't really a constructivist in nature. So I had to really start thinking about what and how am I using technology. So the reason we're doing this is it's really the first step for you in terms of redesigning a unit. And so as you're thinking about how you use technology and where you've used technology, I want you to have in the back of your mind, what is it that what is a unit that you want to redesign, and how can this map help you think that through? So it might not even be a unit. I mean, it could be that you want to redesign a unit. It could be that you want to redesign an approach you use. So for example, maybe you do mini lessons. Maybe you want to think about how you do mini lessons differently because of technology. Or maybe you do centers. How do you want to use technology different in terms of the way you use centers? It could be a lot of different things. So I really want you to think about it. We're going to talk more about it specifically next week when I launch that challenge for you, and we'll be going through the design phase, and so I'll walk you through that as we do the redesign. But I want you to think about this mapping as a way to get you thinking about how and where you want to start playing and redesigning technology. So I guess the big thing that you need to also consider before you do your map is this idea of what is technology. So I've provided a couple of videos for you to explore as well as one reading. The first one is a pretty classic idea text, a chapter from a book that asks that question, what is technology? So it's pretty short. I think it's like 4 or 5 pages. I'd like you to read through that and really think about what they have to say. I've also provided you a couple of short videos. One is by John Spencer, and then another one is by ISU's, and many of you probably already had her. Anna Smith has created a video where she kind of talks through another video that explores the idea of what is technology and looks at it from a historical point of view. So I've provided both of those videos for you to watch and to think about. And I think that will help guide you in your mapping of what you think technology is. So I think that's it for the week. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You will notice that this week is fairly slim in terms of content, and I did that purposefully. The weeks are going to be gearing up as you all are preparing your presentations, and you'll be reading the materials that your classmates have presented to you. So I wanted to give you a week that was a little bit lighter to really help you think about the map that you're creating, to give you time to reflect on your use of technology, and also to give you some time to think through your website if you haven't. I know some of you have already done your first entries, which is great, and I look forward to reading through those more closely. But I wanted to give you some time to build those if needed. Also to start researching and talking through your presentations, because as I said, the schedule is up if you did not notice it last week. But I think that's it, and I look forward to seeing what you create this week. Thanks. Bye-bye.